Never known for being flashy, in his later years he became famous for his colorful socks.
Thank you very, very much.
When George Herbert Walker Bush dedicated his library at Texas A&M with then-President Clinton, ex-presidents Ford and Carter laid out what he felt was his personal and political legacy.
Well, I'd like to have him say that he made some tough decisions and had a very able team to implement the decisions.
During Bush's single term in the White House, 1989 to 1993, the U.S. led a coalition that forced Iraq out of Kuwait. The Soviet Union and communism in Eastern Europe collapsed, and back home he signed the Americans with Disability Act and the Clean Air Act. But it was decades earlier in Texas that Bush planted the seeds for the rise of his career and the Republican Party.
If they didn't have George Herbert Walker Bush, they would have had to invent him or find somebody like him.
After serving in World War II and then graduating from Yale, Bush started in the West Texas oil business. By 1959, he moved to Houston, where his offshore oil drilling company made him a rich man. He was itching to get into politics, and in 1963, he became the Harris County Republican Party chairman.
And came to understand that in his party building activities early in his career in Harris County, that you have to be willing to create coalitions of people who don't always agree with one another.
The man and the candidate for the United States Senate.
In 1964, Bush jumped in with both feet and ran for U.S. Senate. Longtime Austin attorney Harry Whittington befriended Bush, helped raise money for him, and campaigned for him in '64.
Everywhere he went, he was a dynamic person and one that really inspired a new type of politician in Austin or in Texas.
Bush lost.
Baseball is the Bush game. In fact, you might call them a Bush League.
But his campaign was critical in building the Texas GOP. He got more than 1 million votes, something no Republican had ever done before. In 1966, Bush won the first 2 terms in Congress, and in 1970, he ran for the U.S. Senate again, but ended up facing conservative Democrat Lloyd Bentsen.
That Bush and Bentsen were very similar politically. It was very difficult for candidate Bush to establish a leg up on Bentsen, and so Bush lost another Senate race.
Through the 1970s, Bush took appointed national positions, but back in Texas, he kept building the Republican message. In '78, his friend Bill Clements became the state's first Republican governor since Reconstruction. And when Bush's first presidential run fell short in 1980, Clements persuaded Ronald Reagan to pick Bush as his running mate to win Texas. By 1984, the Republicans held their national convention in Dallas, as the state kept shifting to the GOP and Bush looked to solidify support with an eye on 1988.
The prospect of bringing Texas to the Republican Party as a part of the national electoral college building process was a major part of his appeal coming forward.
Texas backed Bush in '88 and '92. After he lost the White House, Bush and his wife Barbara returned to Houston and supported the political rise of their son Jeb, who became governor of Florida, and George W. Bush, who became Texas governor and then, of course, president. The elder Bush was the second American president to be the father of another president.
Tried to serve. My dad did before me. 2 sons are in the public arena, you might say, and we think it's a noble calling.
Ever the sports fan, even when Mr. Bush was confined to a wheelchair, he could be seen at Texans games. He even showed up at Johnny Manziel's Pro Day in College Station. In recent years, both the former president and his wife suffered from declining health. He lost his beloved Barb on April 17th after 73 years of marriage. And though wheelchair-bound, Mr. Bush surprised everyone by showing up at the public viewing for his wife at St. Martin's Episcopal Church. He sat in front of Barbara's casket with his daughter Doro and shook hands with those who came to pay their respects. Following the service, he was captured in this photo, showing members of a rare club of first families. George H.W. Bush, our 41st president, will join his wife and daughter Robin at the family burial plot behind the Presidential Library in College Station, a final resting place for a man who raised a family and a political party in Texas.
What a remarkable life. Those close to Bush 41 are sharing more about the final hours of his life.
Marcelino Benito joins us live outside George H. Lewis and Sons Funeral Home, where Bush's body is being held right now. Marcelino?
Guys, the president's body has been here since midnight tonight. A Bush family spokesman says the president died peacefully at home after one final conversation with his son, former President George W. Bush. Last April, after the death of his wife and former President George H.W. Bush's last serious hospital stay in the Med Center, we now know doctors warned the president not to take his usual trip to Kennebunkport, Maine for the summer. Doctors worried he wouldn't be strong enough to make it back to Houston. Bush family friend and CEO of the President's Library Foundation, David Jones, spent time with him this summer.
He had a difficult summer, recovering from the loss of his wife, and his health was not good. But his spirits were very high, and sense of humor was still there.
But Bush was a fighter and once again defied the odds.
He was actually looking forward to coming back to Houston in October, which he did. Root on the Texans and spend time in his beloved city.
He came back to the city and people he loved so much. Jones says he even went out for lunch and dinner a few times with friends.
His health continued to decline throughout the fall, and it just became more and more difficult for him.
Just 3 days ago, President Bush was able to welcome President Obama at the family home. Sources tell us his son Neil Bush and former Secretary of State James Baker were with him when the president passed. The 43rd President of the United States called him on the phone yesterday, too, told him he was a great dad and he loved him. The president's final words, "I love you too."
When your parent is 94 years old and not in good health, you expect that you don't have a long time left with him. But it's still always a shock, and they're a family of great faith, and I think there is an assurance that he's in a better place with his wife of 73 years and daughter Robin.
Jones says President Bush may be gone, but his legacy endures.
Here in Houston, I hope people will remember President Bush and Mrs. Bush for their devotion to public service.
Now, there will be no opportunities for the public to pay their respects here at the funeral home. The president's body will remain here until Monday, when it is flown to Washington. The president will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. Back to you.
All right, Marcelino, thank you. And we do have more on that. Here's what we know right now about the funeral plans for the president.
His body will stay at the funeral home here until Monday. After that, he will be flown to D.C. to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol building. President Trump has offered up Air Force One to transport Bush. Finally, he will travel to the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and be laid to rest on Thursday.
There will be a public memorial for President Bush next week. Mayor Sylvester Turner is hosting it at Herman Square. It starts at 7 p.m. on Monday night. The Houston Symphony will perform. Everybody is invited. This is a free event, and we will be covering it on air and online at KHOU.com.
People in Houston are finding ways of honoring President Bush.
His statue downtown has become a shrine where people are going to pay their respects. David Gonzalez continues our team coverage with how Bush stood as a beacon of light for people in Houston. David.
Reka, yeah, things have definitely settled down a bit here now that it's gotten dark here in downtown Houston, but there are still people that are coming out here to check in on the people that are coming out here. But like I was saying, this place has been a very popular spot for people to show up and pay their respects. As you can see behind me here at the Bush Monument, people have been dropping off things like flowers, teddy bears, as well as notes and ornaments, trying to decorate this place that, as you mentioned, has become a shrine for people to pay their respects to the 41st president. People who have met him, or even for a brief time, say that President Bush was always full of joy. They say that he made people around them feel very important. For those that never got a chance to meet him, though, they say that he was such a monumental persona, not just here in the U.S., but also around the world. People say President Bush and his family's legacy will always live on here in Houston.
They were so kind and giving. I mean, every time you saw them out in public, they were always willing to say hello or take a picture. And they were always giving of their time. That's all I can tell them about, giving of their time.
People out here say that they feel comfort in knowing that he's been reunited with the love of his life, First Lady Barbara Bush. But back out here live, as you can see, this place, the Bush Monument, overlooks downtown Houston, and it is now a place where people are paying their respects. Actually, we have a group of people here off camera that have come here specifically to pay their respects here at the Bush Monument, and you can expect this place will be a very popular spot in days to come. Ron and Reka.
No doubt that memorial will be growing in the hours and days to come. Thank you so much, David Gonzalez. Hundreds have stopped by the front gate to the Bush's home to hang flowers, wreaths, and American flags. Our team coverage continues with Janelle Bluda joining us live with more on how people there are paying tribute to the 41st president. Janelle.
Ron, mourners have been stopping by all day, paying their respects, dropping off flowers. But the people who say they will miss them the most are their neighbors.
Neighborhood will never be the same.
For Ed Parker, it was the only thing he needed to do today.
They were the best neighbors in the world.
Order wreaths and hang them on his front gate, the gate he shared with his neighbors, former President George Bush and his wife Barbara.
Barbara and I used to walk the dogs every day for 20 years, you know. I miss her and I miss George. That's me.
Inside his house, Parker shows us the snapshots he's taken with the former president over the years.
The country's lost a great person. He's a great man.
The 3 wreaths were ordered this morning and hung by the hands of their creator.
We're honored to somehow in some small way do flowers in their memory.
Ken Center says they also designed the wreaths that were hung when we lost the former First Lady back in April.
When Barbara passed away, they wanted all white, just beautiful soft white flowers. For Mr. Bush, they wanted patriotic red, white, blue.
As the hours pass since the loss of the beloved president, the memorial continues to grow in front of his home. Strangers stopping by to give their condolences for a couple who left such a mark on America and the people who live next door.
They weren't just, as I said, past First Lady and past President. They were friends, they were neighbors.
She was just so down to earth, and George was just so approachable, so easy to talk to you about anything. He was just one of the greatest neighbors.
Well, the most common theme we've heard out here from neighbors is how normal the Bushes tried to be. Mrs. Bush herself even making her own impact, adding benches to the side of the street for maids to sit on while they waited for the bus, and adding neighborhood mosquito spraying for her Secret Service agents to protect them. Ron and Reka.
Yeah, the Bushes had that Houston spirit for sure. Thank you so much, Janelle Bluda. The Bush family is sharing their memories of a beloved father and grandfather.
His son, George W., shared a statement saying, in part, the entire Bush family is deeply grateful for 41's life and love, for the compassion of those who have cared and prayed for Dad, and for the condolences of our friends and fellow citizens.
His grandson, Jeb Bush Jr., said, nothing gave my Gampy more joy than service to others, especially supporting and caring for those who risk making the ultimate sacrifice every day. His leadership taught us to be kinder and gentler, to love each other. We will miss him dearly.
And granddaughter Jenna Bush Hager shared this photo on Instagram with a heartfelt caption. She said, waking up missing this giant of a man who gave me everything. He taught me and my family about service, family, decency, the power of gentle words, and a beautiful heart. I will miss him desperately, but so happy he and my grandmother are back together.
That is such a cute photo. What a beautiful photo.
Very sweet.
His loved ones remember him for his kindness, and George H.W. Bush always credited his remarkable accomplishments in life to the lessons he learned from his family.
It's a family blessed with great wealth, but also with a mission to serve. Here's Lisa Hernandez.
And as president, I can report to the nation
the journey of George Herbert Walker Bush to the presidency of the United States did not begin in a wealthy compound in Kennebunkport, Maine.
The man and the candidate for the United States Senate.
Did not begin with his first campaign for public office here in Texas. The American journey actually began 4 generations earlier in the gold fields of California. A man named Obadiah Bush got gold fever and rushed to California to seek his fortune, but it was a fortune that never came. He gave up on the dream, and on the trip back to be reunited with his family, he died at sea. But a grandson, Samuel Prescott Bush, would find the family's first gold, found it as a master mechanic, a railroad man and industrialist who befriended and worked alongside the Rockefeller family, which gave his son, Prescott Sheldon Bush, a wealthy running start, a Yale education, a railroad executive, a Wall Street banker, a U.S. senator from Connecticut, So when his son, George Herbert Walker Bush, arrived in 1924, the family finances and a political stage appeared set. Born into privilege, his path appeared paved for him. But American blue blood wasn't enough. His journey would still be uniquely his own. Six months after Pearl Harbor, on his 18th birthday, George H.W. Bush volunteered to fight in World War II. When he got his wings, he was the youngest pilot in the Navy and on a bombing run near a now infamous Pacific island called Chichijima. Japanese bullets very nearly ended his story altogether. His engine on fire, he and another crewman bailed out, but only one parachute opened. Of the 3 men in the Avenger torpedo bomber, only the future president would survive. He came home to marry his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce. He kept a Yale family tradition alive, captained the baseball team, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, and set out to find his own fortune in the oil fields of West Texas. The fortunes would come in a then revolutionary business of drilling for oil offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. But family tragedy would find him too. After their first son, George W. Bush, Robin Bush was born, but the little girl fell ill near her 3rd birthday. It was leukemia. The Bushes rushed her to the best medical experts they could find on the East Coast, but she died in October of 1953. She's buried at the Presidential Library in College Station. Her famous father will be laid to rest by her side.
The story of George Bush is a success story.
But the former naval aviator soldiered on. He would be chairman of the Harris County Republican Party.
George Bush, the happy family man, is now George Bush, Republican candidate for the United States Senate.
He never reached the Senate, but served 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives.
I certainly hope, and I'll bet you do too, that our children can grow up knowing what freedom really is.
Ambassador to the United Nations, director of the CIA, and vice president in a storied political career before his family journey brought him to the Oval Office.
We are Americans, part of something larger than ourselves.
But for all his success, he often credited his mom, Dorothy Walker Bush, with having the biggest impact on his life. The devoutly religious matriarch who drilled humility and modesty into her sons. His life was not defined by the political system he navigated. The president's daughter, Dora Bush, wrote, "He was defined by the set of beliefs his mother taught him. By his remarkable life, it's clear Mom taught him well."
Flags are at half-staff at the White House for George H.W. Bush.
He's being honored by presidents both past and present today. President Trump honored him at the G20 summit.
He was a very fine man. I met him on numerous occasions. He was just a high-quality man who truly loved his family. One thing that came through loud and clear, he was very proud of his family and very much loved his family. So he was a terrific guy, and he'll be missed, and he led a full life and a very exemplary life, too, I will say.
Former President Obama, who just visited Mr. Bush this past week, shared this statement. America has lost a patriot and humble servant in George Herbert Walker Bush. While our hearts are heavy today, they are also filled with gratitude, not merely for the years he spent as our 41st president, but for the more than 70 years he spent in devoted service to the country he loved. It's a legacy of service that may never be matched, even though he'd want all of us to try.
And President Clinton posted this on Twitter saying, "Hillary and I mourn the passing of President George H.W. Bush and give thanks for his great long life of service, love, and friendship. I am grateful for every minute I spent with him and will always hold our friendship as one of my life's greatest gifts."
Politics were such a big part of his life, and Mr. Bush answered the call to serve his country at an early age.
Over the years, history unfolded, and he was right in the middle of it. Here's Russ Lewis.
It was in Houston in 1992 that George Bush accepted the nomination for a second term as president.
For a fellow Texan and my friend, George Bush.
Earlier in the week, the Texas vote gave him the delegates he needed. Texans always claimed him as a favorite son, even though he was not born one. He was actually born in Massachusetts to a privileged family. His father, Prescott, was a senator from Connecticut. He went to Yale, where his son and future President George W. would also attend. But Bush's supporters in Texas took to it. He had, after all, come to this state as a young oil man to make his fortune. It seemed he followed that old Texas saying that he wasn't born in this state, but he got here as quickly as he could. In the 60s, Texans sent him to Congress.
I hope to have support from all segments of society, and I'm sure.
By 1970, he was ready to follow his father to the Senate and took on another ambitious young Texas politician named Lloyd Bentsen, and Bentsen beat him.
I wish him the best.
Bush became ambassador to the UN, an envoy to China, and then director of the CIA. In 1980, he ran for president and accused Ronald Reagan of advocating voodoo economics, only to be trounced in the primary. He ended up Reagan's running mate.
I want a kinder and gentler nation.
8 years later, Bush sought the job for himself in a contest that pitted him against Michael Dukakis and Bush's old Texas adversary, Lloyd Bentsen. And this time, it was Bush's team that won in a landslide. But during that campaign, he made a promise that would come back to haunt him.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
The thing that people liked about George H.W. Bush was that, in many ways, for all the wealth, privilege, and power, he seemed like a down-to-earth guy. On a flight into Houston on the eve of the '92 election, he took time to give a Houston reporter a personal tour of Air Force One. He could laugh when a comic called him a mix of Mr. Rogers and John Wayne.
Over the ridge, you put them together, you got George Herbert Walker Bush. That's the thing.
And when he wanted to go skydiving, he did it. The first time to relive his World War II survival in the Pacific. The second time for his 80th birthday, just because he wanted to do it.
You know, because you're 80 years old, that doesn't mean you're out of it, out of the game.
He proved that again by jumping out of an airplane when he turned 85, and once again on his 90th birthday. In fact, he never really wanted to be out of the game. When Bush 43 asked his father to team up with former President Clinton for tsunami relief, he took the job, and they became what Barbara Bush called America's favorite couple, touring devastated places and raising millions to help victims get back on their feet. As for his own life, George Herbert Walker Bush was a man who believed in living it.
So many memories, and he was so self-effacing too. You know, and Dana Carvey making fun of him on Saturday Night Live. I believe people know that he invited Dana Carvey to the White House several times. Dana Carvey loved the Bushes, but of course I covered him for so many years because I started here in '82, so I covered the Bushes in the '80s, the '90s, and from then on. Always so friendly and graceful. All the Bush family members from the time in 1988 in New Orleans. I was there when he accepted the nomination of his party, so covered him before he was president, after he was president, so many charitable events, always kind and generous.
Yeah, he's been in the public eye for so long and yet seems so down to earth. What's also interesting is a lot of people have been talking after his death about his resilience in life. You know, even after his wife Barbara passed away in April, he was quoted as saying, "I'm not ready to go yet." And you know, he spent another summer at their family home in Maine and wanted to enjoy that summer with his family. And then James A. Baker, his former Secretary of State, recently spoke, I believe, to the New York Times and called him a very competitive man, which you could see in his career, but said he competed with death right until the very end. I mean, he basically kept fighting and kept cheating death until the very end. So he'd been suffering from Parkinson's for quite a while too. So so much to look up to.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Houston spirit, I think he exemplified the Houston spirit, how we are as people, down to earth. And we're all going to miss him. You know, our thoughts and prayers go out to his family. And he was such a cheerleader for this town, too.
Yes, he was. And that's why everyone keeps saying, yes.
Literally
all the storms, yeah. He was our neighbor.
All right, just some of our thoughts tonight. Well, another person sharing his memories of Bush is Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner. He extended his condolences and prayers to the Bush family today, saying George and Barbara Bush loved Houston, and Houston loved them right back. He praised the couple for their accessibility and courtesy to average Houstonians. Above all, the mayor said former President Bush was a statesman and a unifier loved by Republicans and Democrats alike.
He treated everyone the same, no matter which level they may have been on. That speaks volumes about the sort of person that he is. Sad to say, we don't have a lot of people like him anymore. He's an excellent role model for the rest of us to emulate, okay? That will be his legacy.
Mayor Turner also remembered sitting next to the Bushes at Astros and Texans games and said their appearance at the Super Bowl shortly after being hospitalized exemplified Houston strong. Mr. Bush was also a big fan of the Rockets, especially their owner, Tillman Fertitta. Matt Musil is sharing more about their friendship. Hey, Matt.
That's right, Ronnie. I spoke with Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta late last night, right after he found out about his friend George H.W. Bush passing away. And he'll never forget the way 41 and his wife Barbara supported our Houston sports teams.
He loved football, baseball, basketball, and I can't ever think. I remember a Super Bowl party I held at my house that he was there, and he just loved talking about sports.
And Tillman says his family goes way back with the Bush family when his grandfather and 41 did business together down in Galveston.
My grandfather, I was named after, was Tillman Falgout, and I can remember being a 12-year-old going over to his house in Galveston, Texas, and George Bush sitting there eating crawfish with him. And so it goes back into the 60s when George had Zapata Drilling, and my grandfather had the crew boats that would supply the drilling rigs.
Like Ronnie and Reka, because of my job, I've had a chance to meet with all kinds of high-profile individuals, and interacting with 41 was always a kick. Back in 2002, the Texans' first season, his son Bush, 43, was in the Oval Office, and I was up in Washington, D.C. covering the Texans-Redskins game. 41 was also on the sidelines, and before the game, I was summoned by a Secret Service agent to come over and meet with him. I said, sure, and after 41 complimented me on my overcoat that I was wearing that cold day, he told me that he really wanted to meet the Redskins' new head coach that year, Steve Spurrier. And I made it happen. Now, Spurrier had no idea who I was, but 41 looked over at me, winked, thanked me, and I just moved on down the sideline. Ronnie and Reka, the local sports teams and their fans will definitely miss 41's fun-loving and sports-loving personality.
Well, I'm glad you could help them out with the strangers in Washington that day.
Right.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Another sign of Bush's massive legacy in Houston comes from the owners of Fuzzy's Pizza. The family pizzeria is a staple in West Houston and has been a Bush family favorite for decades. The owners even named 2 pizzas after them, including the President Bush's Pizza and First Lady Barbara Bush's Pizza, telling us the couple was like family to them. Today, they, along with customers, remembered Mr. Bush.
The Bushes were a unique pack of people. And so I, in his honor, decided, well, if I can't do anything or offer anything, at least I can come and have something I enjoyed, he enjoyed, in his honor.
I feel sad because he knows my dad, he knows my mother. He was very close to the family, my brothers.
The owner there, Ray Hajar, went on to say he had never met anyone more humble than 41. He plans on putting up a banner in the front of his store honoring him this upcoming Monday.
But his legacy wasn't limited to Houston. George H.W. Bush also made a massive impact on College Station. Hundreds of visitors are pouring into his presidential library there. Brandy Smith is live there to show us how people are paying their respects. Hello, Brandy.
Hey there, Ron. There is definitely an air of sadness here, but the people I talked to say they didn't come to his presidential library to mourn George H.W. Bush. They came here to celebrate his extraordinary life. His name is one you see all over Texas A&M University, on sign after sign after sign. But what does George H.W. Bush mean to you? We asked people here to pick one word to summarize 41.
I think he's of the old school where those qualities were important, and today I feel that they're missing largely in the political circles.
He would respect the common man.
I chose dedicated because I feel that he really loved his job. I feel like he was really passionate about what he was doing, even though sometimes people disagreed with him. Or maybe didn't like what he was doing. He really loved what he did.
I chose honest because he was always honest and loyal to others and always kind and respectful.
He's just known throughout Texas for his family, and it's a legacy that we're very proud of here.
As the visitors poured into his library, they filled up our board. Integrity, Humble, patriot, family, love.
To be at such a state, in such a high office, you have to love the people that you're leading. And that is the only word that I could think of which enveloped our president.
So I didn't just pose that question to the folks who are visiting here. I also asked you on social media, and dozens of you responded. Hugh called President Bush a gentleman. To Scott, he was a character. For Sammy, the word is Houston. And those all kind of add up to another word, that is legacy, something he no doubt leaves behind even after he's laid to rest here in College Station next to his wife Barbara and their daughter Robin. Live in College Station, Brandy Smith, KHOU 11 News.
Thank you so much, Brandy. That is a huge legacy we will be talking about all week long. The Bush School at Texas A&M was founded in 1997, but U.S. News and World Report has named it as one of the best grad schools in the country 5 years running. President Bush graciously sat down with Shern Minchow to talk about his namesake school on the day he met with a family whose child never had the chance to attend.
Yeah, nice to see you, Susan. Hi. Hi, Mickey Bernice. Nice to see you.
It's not every day you get to meet a United States president, but for this Bunker Hill family, it was bittersweet.
But how old was the kid?
He was 3 days away from 15.
Their son Ryan died in 2010 during a hiking accident while in South Africa for the World Cup. It captured international headlines. 3 days before that trip, the Memorial High School freshman visited the Bush Library, and the Bush School caught his attention.
Ethical leadership is an essential element of the U.S.'s role in international affairs.
This is where a nation goes to learn how to manage its affairs. The president's goal? Simple.
In another 50 years, where would you like to see the Bush School?
I hope to have it the best school of government and public service.
In fact, he visited several times a month.
They tell me that you like, when you come to visit, you like to sit in on the classes.
We do that from time to time. I enjoy listening to them. We got some able professors there, and these kids are smart. I mean, they're bright. I can't get over it.
A hallmark requirement, capstone research projects for real clients, from private corporations to the State Department to law enforcement.
The students looking into issues with narco traffickers and gangs across Texas and crime, and that's pretty heady stuff.
And it gives them a touch of the real world. It gives them a touch of some real problems and solving real problems. I like the whole concept of that.
The school's dean, Ryan Crocker, boasted,
every single one of them is client funded. Over 75% of Bush School graduates do go into public service, and that's more than double the average from other schools of public affairs.
Homeland Security is another area of expertise, and recruiters know it.
FBI, DIA, CIA, any of the three-letter alphabet soup government organizations you can name, they pretty much hit it pretty hot and heavy down here.
Even at the age of 14, young Ryan Bernice had read about the Bush School and said, that's what I want to do.
So in Ryan's memory, the Bernices have endowed a scholarship, raising just over $250,000 so far.
They share, if you will, almost a touch point with you, having lost a child.
Just barely gotten over that myself. It was many, many years ago.
Two families bound together now by the loss of a child and the love of a nation.
You may have seen this by now. It's an image that is being circulated on social media by so many people. It's by cartoonist Marshall Ramsey, and it shows Mr. Bush arriving on a plane, World War II plane, to join Mrs. Bush and their daughter, Robin, with Mrs. Bush simply saying, "We waited for you," as they walked toward the clouds. Barbara Bush died earlier this year, and their daughter, Robin, died of leukemia when she was 3 years old. Many people finding comfort in knowing that these three are now reunited.
Yeah. That's some solace today.
Oh, yeah.
They all are reunited. Well, thanks for watching. We'll have a lot more on the life and legacy of President George H.W. Bush tonight at 10 o'clock.
For now, we want to leave you with a look at his life's accomplishments told through pictures.